What happens when a man who has everything decides his pregnant wife is something he can simply throw away? Sterling Hale, a millionaire carved from ice, shatters his perfect life and his wife Leora's heart for a younger, more dazzling mistress. He thinks he's won. He thinks he's in control. But he's about to learn the devastating truth. The only thing more dangerous than a woman scorned is a woman who finds her strength. When Leora not only survives, but begins to build a new life with his greatest rival, Sterling's cold facade cracks, unleashing an obsession that will destroy everything he has left. This is a story of ultimate betrayal, a woman's incredible fight for redemption, and the explosive consequences of a powerful man realizing he lost it all. The silence in their Manhattan penthouse was a living entity. It breathed in the sterile air, circulated by a system Leora had once marveled at, and now found suffocating. It clung to the vast panes of glass that overlooked Central Park, a sprawling carpet of green that felt 1,000,000 miles away. For 3 weeks, this silence had been her primary companion, a more constant presence than her husband, Sterling Hale. At 34, Sterling was a titan of industry, a man who didn't just walk into rooms but conquered them. His face, a collection of sharp, handsome angles, was a mask of cool calculation that had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who had never been told no. When he had first turned his intense, cobalt-blue eyes on Leora Quinn, a quiet art historian with a love for dusty books and impressionist light, she had felt like the most seen woman in the world. He had pursued her with a singular focus that she mistook for devotion. It was only after the wedding, after her signature was on the prenuptial agreement his lawyers had called a formality, that she realized it wasn't devotion. It was acquisition. Now, at 28, Leora was 3 months pregnant with their first child, a fact that had brought a flicker of something unreadable to Sterling's eyes before the mask slammed back down. She had hoped it would bridge the chasm that had been widening between them. A silent, creeping abyss filled with late nights he explained away as board meetings, and a chill in their bed that had nothing to do with the thermostat. He entered the living area, his custom-made Italian shoes making no sound on the polished marble floor. He had already showered and changed from his workday armor into a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her first car. He didn't look at her, instead walking to the floor-to-ceiling wine fridge. "We need to talk, Leora." His voice was calm, measured, the voice he used when closing a hostile takeover. Leora's hand went instinctively to her still flat stomach. A knot of ice formed in her chest. "I tried to talk to you last night, Sterling. You came in after I was asleep. I was busy." He selected a bottle of sparkling water, twisting the cap with a sharp crack that made her flinch. He still hadn't turned to face her. "This isn't working." The 4 words hung in the air, brutally simple. Leora's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. What isn't working? The schedule? I can have dinner ready later, I just thought—" "Us." He finally turned, his eyes holding hers. There was no anger, no sadness, just a profound, terrifying emptiness. This marriage, it's run its course. The breath left her body in a painful rush. "What are you talking about? Sterling, I'm pregnant." Her voice was a whisper, a desperate plea for him to remember, to care. "I'm aware," he said, taking a sip of water. "Arrangements will be made. The child will be well taken care of, obviously. You will be too. I'm not a monster." The detached cruelty of it was more painful than any screaming match could have been. He was divesting, cutting his losses. She was a failed investment. "A monster," she echoed, a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat. "You're talking about our baby, our marriage, like it's a line item on a balance sheet. There's someone else, isn't there?" For the first time, a flicker of annoyance crossed his features. "Her name is Vivienne, and yes, it's serious. Vivienne Frost." The name hit Leora with the force of a physical blow. A 24-year-old Instagram model and socialite she'd seen plastered on gossip sites, often at the same charity galas Sterling attended alone. Leora had told herself it was nothing. Sterling had assured her it was nothing. The casual way he said her name now, the possessive finality of "it's serious," told Leora it had been everything. "So that's it?" Leora stood up, her legs trembling. "You bring this girl into our lives and I'm just supposed to disappear? With your child inside me?" "I would prefer a lack of drama," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a warning tone. "My lawyers will be in touch with you tomorrow. They've drawn up a generous severance package. Consider it a bonus for your time with the company." He actually used those words. Severance package. The insult was so profound, so dehumanizing, it snapped something inside her. The fear receded, replaced by a surge of white-hot rage. "The company? Is that what I was to you, Sterling? An employee of Hale Holdings? You were my wife. The position is no longer available." He set the water bottle down on the marble countertop with a sharp click. "I've arranged for you to stay at the plaza for a few weeks, until you find a more permanent arrangement. Vivienne will be moving in this weekend. It's best if you're gone by tomorrow evening." He was evicting her. From her home. From her life. The power imbalance was staggering, absolute. He held every card. The money, the lawyers, the home. He had systematically isolated her from her old life, her old friends, until he was the sun her world revolved around, and now he was extinguishing the light. "No," she said, the word feeling foreign and powerful on her tongue. Sterling raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "No, I will not be discussing my life, or the life of my child, with your lawyers. I will not be packed up and shipped off to a hotel like last season's luggage. You want a divorce, Sterling? You'll have to go through me, not your legal department." He studied her, a flicker of surprise in his cold eyes. He had expected tears, pleading, a swift and tidy collapse. He had not expected defiance. A slow, chilling smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "Very well, Leora," he said softly. "But you need to understand something. When I want something, I get it. And when I want something gone, it disappears. Have your little moment of defiance. But don't forget who you're dealing with." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Leora standing alone in the cavernous silence. The icy knot in her chest had spread, chilling her to the bone. He wasn't just leaving her. He was erasing her. And as her hand trembled over the slight curve of her belly, she knew this wasn't just a divorce. It was a war for her survival, and the survival of the one pure thing she had left. The next 24 hours were a blur of calculated cruelty. By morning, Leora's access to their joint accounts was frozen. A curt email from Sterling's personal assistant informed her that a moving service, for her convenience, would arrive at 2 p.m. to pack her personal belongings and transport them to a storage unit. The key to the penthouse would be deactivated at 6 p.m. sharp. He was dismantling her life with the efficiency of a corporate restructuring. Her best friend, Piper Hart, a fiery redhead and struggling theater actress who had never trusted Sterling, was there in an hour, her arms full of bodega coffee and righteous fury. "The son of a bitch!" Piper seethed, pacing the length of the enormous walk-in closet while Leora numbly pointed at clothes. The actual, literal son of a bitch. A severance package? Does he think he's God? "He thinks he's Sterling Hale," Leora replied, her voice hollow. "To him, that's the same thing." Packing was a surreal experience. This dress, bought for a gala where Sterling had ignored her all night. Those shoes, a thoughtful gift after he'd missed their anniversary. Each item was a ghost, a memory of a love she now realized had been a meticulously crafted illusion. The movers, two burly men who refused to make eye contact, worked with a silent, grim efficiency, that made it feel like they were packing up a dead person's effects. By 5 o'clock, Leora was standing on Park Avenue with 2 suitcases, her purse, and a check Piper had pressed into her hand. The doorman, who had greeted her with a deferential Mrs. Hale for 3 years, now looked straight through her. Her key was just a piece of useless metal. She was officially an exile. Piper took her to her tiny, cluttered but warm apartment in the West Village. It was a 5th-floor walk-up that smelled of old books and brewing tea, a world away from the sterile, scentless air of the penthouse. For the first week, Leora barely left the guest room. She slept, cried, and stared at the ceiling, the psychological whiplash leaving her nauseous and dizzy. The morning sickness was a cruel, constant reminder of the baby that Sterling referred to as an arrangement. Her first communication from Sterling's legal team was a thick, intimidating packet of documents. The terms were brutally clear. In exchange for her signing an ironclad NDA and agreeing to a swift, uncontested divorce, she would receive a one-time payment. The custody arrangement for the unborn issue was laid out in chilling detail. Sterling would have sole legal custody, with Leora being granted supervised visitation rights at his discretion. They were trying to buy her child. "He can't do this!" Piper raged, throwing the papers onto her coffee table. "This is insane! He's trying to bully you into disappearing!" "It's not bullying," Leora said, a dead calm settling over her. "It's strategy." That was the moment the embers of her old self, the sharp, analytical mind of the historian, began to glow. She had spent years studying the strategies of kings and conquerors. Sterling was no different. He was using overwhelming force to secure a quick, unconditional surrender. And she wouldn't give it to him. With Piper's help, she found a small, fiercely intelligent family law attorney named Serena Cruz. Serena, a woman whose sharp suits and sharper mind commanded respect, read through the proposed agreement, her expression growing stormier with each page. "This isn't an agreement, Ms. Quinn," Serena said, her voice laced with steel. "It's a declaration of war. Mr. Hale is used to people folding. We're not going to fold." The first step was survival. The check from Piper wouldn't last forever. Leora started selling off the jewelry Sterling had bought her, the consolation prizes, the guilt gifts. Each transaction felt like shedding a layer of a false skin. With the money, she rented a small, one-bedroom apartment in a modest building in Greenwich Village. It was sparse, with second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting. But it was hers. One rainy Tuesday, feeling a desperate need for air, she found herself wandering through the small, independent art galleries that dotted the neighborhood. The quiet reverence of the spaces soothed her frayed nerves. In one gallery, a collection of stark, powerful photographs of urban decay caught her eye. She was so absorbed in one particular piece, a shot of a single, resilient weed growing through a crack in a concrete monolith, that she didn't notice the man who had come to stand beside her. "It's incredible, isn't it?" a deep voice said. "How life finds a way." Leora turned. The man was tall and lean, with dark, thoughtful eyes and a shadow of a beard. He was dressed in a well-tailored but unassuming gray suit. There was a quiet intensity about him that was compelling. "It is," she agreed, turning back to the photo. "It's defiant." An apt word. He gestured to the photograph. "Most people see the decay. You see the defiance." He smiled, a genuine warm expression that was a startling contrast to Sterling's cold smirks. "I'm Cassian Wolfe." The name sent a jolt through her. Cassian Wolfe, the CEO of Wolfe Development. He was Sterling's most significant and bitter rival. They were polar opposites in the business world. Sterling was known for hostile takeovers and ruthless downsizing. Wolfe was known for sustainable projects and a reputation for integrity. Their enmity was the stuff of financial legend. Sterling despised him with a passion that bordered on pathological. Leora's guard went up instantly. Was this a coincidence? "Leora Quinn," she said, her tone cooler than she intended. Cassian's eyes widened in recognition. It wasn't her name he recognized. but her face. He had seen her in photos, on Sterling Hale's arm. The ghost of a pained expression crossed his face. He knew who she was, and likely, what had happened. The New York elite gossip mill was ruthlessly efficient. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft with what sounded like genuine sympathy. "For what it's worth. I've seen his work up close. No one deserves that." Leora bristled. She didn't want his pity. "I don't know what you mean." He didn't push. He simply nodded, his gaze returning to the photograph. "Well, Ms. Quinn, it was a pleasure to meet you." He gave her another small, respectful smile and walked away, leaving Leora with a strange mix of suspicion and an unwelcome flicker of warmth. He hadn't been predatory or invasive. He had been kind. Meanwhile, Sterling was discovering that his life with Vivian was not the seamless upgrade he had anticipated. The penthouse, once a silent sanctuary of his control, was now filled with the chaos of Vivian's world. Her friends, vapid and loud, were a constant presence. The silence he craved was replaced by the incessant clicking of her phone's camera as she documented every moment of her new, luxurious life for her followers. She was beautiful, exciting, and completely enthralled by him. But he found her adoration cloying, her conversation shallow. He'd won, but the prize felt hollow. He had expected Leora to crumble, to take the money and vanish, a footnote in his biography. Instead, his lawyers reported that she had retained counsel. She was fighting back. He would see paparazzi shots of her, looking pale and thin but undeniably resolute, walking into a lawyer's office. One evening, a photo from a society blog popped up on his feed. It was from the gallery opening. A candid shot showed Leora, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, talking to Cassian Wolfe. They weren't touching, weren't even standing particularly close, but they were sharing a space, a moment. A sickening, unfamiliar emotion coiled in Sterling's gut. It was hot, acidic, and tasted like poison. It was jealousy. It was possession. How dare she? How dare he? She was still Mrs. Sterling Hale. She was carrying his child. The sight of her in the same frame as his most hated rival was a personal, intolerable affront. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I want to know everything about her new life," he commanded, his voice a low growl. "Where she goes, who she sees, everything. And I want leverage on Wolfe. Find it. I don't care what it takes." He had tried to erase her with indifference. Now, he would erase her with his power. The game had changed. It was no longer about a quiet divorce. It was about utter, complete destruction. Life in the village was a study in contrasts for Leora. The loss of immense wealth was less jarring than the return of autonomy. She learned the rhythms of the subway, the names of the grocers at the local market, the simple joy of buying a coffee without it being charged to a faceless corporate account. It was a smaller life, but it was profoundly and wholly her own. The legal battle was a slow, grinding war of attrition. Sterling's lawyers sent endless motions, demanded exhaustive financial disclosures from her pre-marriage life, and attempted to paint her as an unstable gold digger. Serena Cruz was a bulldog, countering every move with meticulous, unyielding professionalism. "He's trying to bankrupt you emotionally," Serena told her during one grueling strategy session. "Don't let him." Leora's second encounter with Cassian Wolfe was just as unexpected as the first. She was in a small, independent bookstore, running her hand over the spines of art history texts when he spoke her name. Leora. She turned, startled. He was holding a biography of the architect Louis Kahn. He looked less formal today, in dark jeans and a simple, well-fitted shirt. "Mr. Wolfe?" "Cassian, please," he insisted, a gentle smile in his eyes. He gestured with the book. "A fan of Kahn?" "I am," she admitted. "I wrote my master's thesis on his use of light at the Kimball Art Museum." A look of genuine delight spread across his face. "The Kimball is a masterpiece. It's practically a religious experience. For the next 20 minutes, they forgot who they were, the jilted wife, the corporate rival, and became two people nerding out over architectural theory. He spoke with a passion and intelligence that was captivating. He wasn't just a developer who built glass towers. He was a man who understood the soul of a building. "Listen," he said as they stood by the door. "This is going to sound forward, and please feel free to say no. I'm hosting a small dinner party on Friday. A few friends, architects, artists, low-key. I think you'd find it interesting. No ulterior motives, I promise. Just good conversation." Leora hesitated. Her every instinct, honed by years of Sterling's manipulations, screamed at her to be suspicious. Why was he being so kind? But another, quieter voice, the one that was tired of being afraid, urged her to say yes. She was lonely. She missed being around people who shared her passions. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself. The dinner party was at his Soho loft, a stunning space filled with books, art, and warm, reclaimed wood. It was the antithesis of Sterling's penthouse, a home, not a showroom. The guests were warm, engaging, and blissfully unaware of her connection to Sterling Hale. For the first time in months, Leora felt like herself again. Not the discarded wife, but Leora Quinn, the art historian. She and Cassian talked for an hour, uninterrupted. He told her about his start, how he worked his way up from a small construction firm. His vision always focused on creating spaces that served communities, not just egos. He listened, truly listened. As she spoke about her abandoned career, the passion she still held for it. "You should be working in the field," he said, his expression serious. "You have a brilliant eye. Have you ever considered art consulting for architectural firms? Curating the spaces they build?" "I wouldn't even know where to start," she confessed. "You start by building a portfolio," he said simply. "Offer your services pro bono to a small firm on a notable project. Build your name." He paused. "A friend of mine is heading a new community library project in Brooklyn. They have a shoestring budget for acquisitions. They could use someone with your expertise to help them source affordable, meaningful pieces from local artists." It wasn't a handout. It was a door, slightly ajar. It was a sign of respect for her talent, something she hadn't felt in years. Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you, Cassian. That means a great deal." Their relationship grew slowly, organically, from that night on. They met for coffee to discuss the library project. He'd send her articles about new exhibitions. She found herself looking forward to his texts, to his calm, steady presence. He never once spoke ill of Sterling. He never pried into the details of her divorce. His focus was always on her future. The library project became her lifeline. She threw herself into it, scouring student showcases and small galleries, meeting with young, hungry artists. She was good at it. She was negotiating deals, curating a collection, bringing a space to life. She was building something, just as Sterling was trying to tear her down. The slow shift in her was palpable. The fear that had been her constant companion began to recede, replaced by a budding confidence. Her body was changing, the gentle swell of her pregnancy now a visible, reassuring curve. She was creating life in more ways than one. Sterling, accustomed to hourly updates from his security team, watched this evolution with a mounting sense of rage. He saw photos of Leora, her face animated and happy, leaving the library site in Brooklyn. He saw her sharing a laugh with Cassian Wolfe over coffee. The narrative he had constructed in his mind, the pathetic, broken wife, was being rewritten before his eyes. And he was not the author. His obsession, once a cold, calculated strategy, was becoming a hot, consuming fire. He saw Cassian not just as a business rival, but as a thief, stealing what was rightfully his. Not Leora the woman, but the idea of her, the mother of his heir, a Hale possession. Seeing her thrive without him, and worse, with the help of Wolf, was an intolerable narcissistic injury. The legal tactics escalated. His lawyers filed a motion for an emergency hearing, claiming Leora's unstable living situation and questionable associations posed a risk to the fetus. It was a thinly veiled attack on her friendship with Cassian. Sterling's life with Vivian was deteriorating rapidly. Her constant need for public validation grated on him. He'd come home seeking sanctuary and find her in the middle of a live stream, pouting for her followers. One evening, she confronted him, her voice shrill. "People are talking, Sterling. They're posting pictures of her with him. It's humiliating. Why haven't you crushed her yet? You promised you'd handle it." "I am handling it," he bit out, the pressure in his skull building. "It doesn't look like it," she cried. "It looks like she's winning. And you look weak." The word weak struck a nerve deep in his soul, the one place his father's corrosive voice still echoed. He looked at Vivian, at her perfectly constructed face, and for the first time, he felt nothing but contempt. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glitter, and the glitter was starting to look cheap. He walked out, leaving her sputtering in a cloud of expensive perfume. He drove aimlessly through the city, the rage and confusion churning within him. He ended up parked across the street from Leora's modest apartment building. The lights were on in her window. He imagined her in there, her life moving on, this new person growing inside her. A life he had created and discarded. Then, he saw it. Cassian Wolf's car pulled up. He got out, holding a bag of what looked like takeout. He buzzed, was let in, and a few moments later, his silhouette appeared in her window next to hers. Sterling's hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. It was no longer about strategy. It was no longer about business. It was primal. He had to break them. He had to prove that he was the architect of her world, and if he couldn't build it, he would burn it to the ground. The motion for an emergency hearing was Sterling's declaration of total war. He was no longer trying to control the narrative. He was trying to scorch the earth. The legal filing was a masterpiece of character assassination, filled with half-truths and vicious innuendo. It painted Leora as a reckless, emotionally volatile woman, and Cassian as a predatory opportunist using her to get at Sterling. It requested that the court order a psychiatric evaluation for Leora and grant Sterling temporary sole custody of the baby the moment it was born. Sitting in Serena Cruz's office, Leora read the document, her hands shaking. The words were a violation, a twisting of her reality into something ugly and unrecognizable. "He's using the baby as a hostage," Leora said, her voice trembling with a fury that burned away her tears. "This isn't about his concern for the child. It's about punishing me for not breaking." "It's a classic, scorched earth tactic from a narcissist," Serena said, her face grim. "He can't stand that you're building a new life, particularly with Cassian Wolf. We fight it. We document everything. Your work on the library project, your stable home, your prenatal appointments. We build a fortress of facts to withstand his fiction." The hearing date was set. The psychological toll was immense. Leora felt as though she were living under a microscope, every action scrutinized, every choice second-guessed. Sleep offered little escape, her dreams filled with sterile courtrooms and Sterling's cold, triumphant smile. Cassian was her rock. When she called him, her voice cracking as she told him about the court filing, he was at her apartment within the hour. He didn't offer platitudes or false reassurances. He sat with her, read the entire document, and his jaw tightened with a quiet, controlled anger. "He will not win this, Leora," Cassian said, his voice a low, steady anchor in her storm. "My lawyers will coordinate with Serena. We'll provide any and all documentation to refute these lies. I won't let him do this to you." His steadfastness was a balm to her shredded nerves. But a seed of guilt took root in her heart. "He's doing this because of you, Cassian. If I hadn't let you into my life, no. He cut her off gently but firmly, turning to face her. His dark eyes were intense, serious. He's doing this because he's a bully who is terrified of losing control. He would have found another reason, another person to use as a weapon. This is who he is. The only thing that has changed is that you are not facing him alone. In that moment, the unspoken thing between them shifted. The slow burn of friendship, of mutual respect, finally caught fire. He reached out, his hand covering hers. It was the first time he had touched her with such deliberate tenderness. The warmth of his skin was a stark contrast to the memory of Sterling's icy touch. "I'm falling in love with you, Leora," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know the timing is a disaster. I know your life is a battlefield right now. But I can't pretend it's just friendship anymore." Tears streamed down Leora's face, not of sorrow, but of a profound, overwhelming relief. It felt like the first breath after being held underwater for too long. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she confessed. Their first kiss wasn't a desperate, passionate affair. It was gentle, hesitant, a question and an answer all at once. It was a promise of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Sterling, however, was spiraling. His obsession was consuming his life. He was distracted at work, his Midas touch faltering. He made a reckless, ill-advised bid in a major auction for a new telecom company, a move driven by ego rather than strategy, and lost millions. His board members were starting to whisper. The infallible Sterling Hale was looking volatile. His home life was a wasteland. Vivian, seeing her dream life and Sterling's attention slipping away, grew more desperate. She alternated between screaming accusations and pathetic attempts to reignite his passion. She would dress in lingerie he'd once found exciting, and he would look straight through her, his mind miles away, parked on a street in Greenwich Village. "What does she have that I don't?" She shrieked at him one night, after he'd spent an hour silently staring at his phone, a private investigator's photo of Leora and Cassian leaving a restaurant on the screen. "Nothing," Sterling snapped, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. But it was a lie. Leora had a quiet strength he had mistaken for weakness. She had a resilience he couldn't break. She had a core of integrity that made Vivian's desperate machinations look tawdry and cheap. Leora had been real, and he had thrown her away for this performance. Vivian's fear and jealousy curdled into something venomous. She saw Leora not just as a rival for Sterling's affection, but as the wrecking ball to her carefully constructed future. If Sterling's empire crumbled, so did she. She had clawed her way out of a destitute background she hid from everyone, and she would not go back. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She found Leora's address. One afternoon, she appeared at the door of the Greenwich Village apartment, dressed in a staggeringly expensive outfit, her face a mask of false concern. Leora opened the door, her heart sinking. "Vivian, what do you want?" "I'm worried about you, Leora," Vivian began, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "And I'm worried about Sterling. This war between you, it's destroying him." "This war was declared by him," Leora said coolly, not inviting her in. "But you keep fighting back," Vivian pressed, her eyes glinting. "You and Cassian Wolf. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're making Sterling look weak, and that's the one thing he can't tolerate. He'll ruin you. He'll ruin Wolf. He will burn everything to the ground before he loses." "Is that a threat?" Vivian's facade cracked, a sneer twisting her perfect lips. "It's a fact. You think you're so righteous, don't you? The poor, abandoned wife. But you're not as innocent as you look. I know you were feeding him doubts about me long before I came along. I know you were playing the victim to make him feel guilty." Leora stared at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about? I never did that." "Oh, please," Vivian scoffed. "Don't play dumb. You think you can just take him back? He doesn't want you. He's only doing this because his ego is bruised. Leave him alone. Disappear. Take the money and go. It's the best thing for everyone, especially your baby." The confrontation was bewildering, Vivian's accusations nonsensical. But it was also revealing. Vivian wasn't a confident victor. She was terrified. She was standing on a trapdoor and she knew it. The exchange, however, had been observed. A man in a parked car across the street had filmed the entire thing on his phone. He was a private investigator. But he wasn't working for Sterling. He was working for Cassian. After the court filing, Cassian had, with a heavy heart, hired a discreet firm to tail Vivian, suspecting she was more than just a passive player in Sterling's cruelty. He needed to protect Leora from all angles. That night, Cassian watched the video. He saw Vivian's desperation, heard her bizarre, baseless accusations. Something felt off. On a hunch, he had the investigator do a deep dive, not just on Vivian Frost, the model, but on who she was before. What he found was the hidden motive, the secret that powered her entire existence, and it was the key that would unlock Sterling's self-made prison and bring his carefully constructed world crashing down. The day of the custody hearing dawned gray and oppressive. The sky over Manhattan the color of bruised slate. The courtroom was a cold, wood-paneled box, designed to intimidate and diminish. Leora sat beside Serena Cruz, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly over her 6-month pregnant belly. Cassian sat 2 rows behind her, a silent, solid presence. Sterling sat at the opposing table, flanked by a team of 3 lawyers. He looked impeccable in a dark, severe suit, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He refused to look at Leora, his gaze fixed on the judge's empty bench. He radiated an aura of immense, unshakable power. The hearing began, and Sterling's lead attorney, a slick, silver-haired man named Lincoln Graves, went on the attack. He painted a picture of Leora's life as one of instability, citing her move to a less secure neighborhood and her inadvisable relationship with a man known to have a vendetta against Mr. Hale. He was weaving a fiction of recklessness, and with every word, Leora felt her reality slipping. Then Serena Cruz rose to speak. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm and clear. "We are not here today because of my client's instability. We are here because of Mr. Hale's obsession." Serena systematically dismantled their case. She presented Leora's lease, her prenatal records, glowing letters of recommendation from the library board. She presented a detailed report from a child psychologist who had evaluated Leora and found her to be remarkably resilient and eminently prepared for motherhood. Then she played her trump card. "Your Honor, the petitioner claims my client's association with Mr. Cassian Wolfe is a source of instability. I would argue it is Mr. Hale's reaction to this friendship that is the real cause for concern." She turned to Sterling's table. "Mr. Graves, is your client aware that his companion, Miss Vivian Frost, paid a visit to my client's home 2 days ago?" A flicker of surprise in Sterling's eyes. He shot a glance at Vivian, who sat in the front row, suddenly pale. "And is he aware," Serena continued, her voice rising, "that Miss Frost threatened my client? We have a sworn affidavit from a witness." Graves objected. But the judge, her interest piqued, allowed it. The mood in the courtroom shifted. The first crack appeared in Sterling's monolithic facade. But Cassian knew this wasn't enough. Sterling could dismiss Vivian's actions as those of a jealous woman. He had to detonate the truth. During a short recess, he approached Serena and Leora, his face grim. He held a thin file. "There's something you both need to see," he said. "It explains everything." He laid out the findings of his investigator. Vivian Frost was born Vera Kosloff. Her father, a small-time contractor in New Jersey, had been driven into bankruptcy and despair a decade earlier after his company was deliberately crushed in a hostile materials buyout. The man who orchestrated that buyout, who saw a tiny competitor and decided to extinguish it for sport was a young, ruthlessly ambitious Sterling Hale. Vera's father had taken his own life 6 months later. Leora gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a long-con revenge plot. She didn't just meet Sterling at a gala, Cassian explained, his voice low and urgent. She targeted him. She studied him. She spent 2 years maneuvering herself into his orbit. She learned his weaknesses, his ego, his rivalry with me. She likely fed him lies about you, Leora, fanning the flames of his insecurity to push him into her arms. This was never about love. It was about vengeance. She wanted to become his wife, secure her future, and then destroy him from the inside, just as he destroyed her family. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Vivian's bizarre accusations, her desperation, her intimate knowledge of how to manipulate Sterling's ego. Sterling, returning to the courtroom, saw the three of them huddled together, saw the file in Cassian's hand, and a cold dread, an emotion he hadn't felt since childhood, began to seep into his bones. When the hearing resumed, Serena Cruz requested permission to call a surprise witness to the stand, Vivian Frost. Panic flared in Vivian's eyes. She tried to refuse, but the judge, her curiosity now fully engaged, compelled her. On the stand, under Serena's razor-sharp questioning, Vivian's composure crumbled. The lies unraveled. When Serena produced a copy of her father's bankruptcy filing, with Sterling's signature on the acquisition papers, Vivian broke completely. "He deserved it," she sobbed, the words tearing out of her, raw and full of a decade of hate. She looked directly at Sterling, her face a mess of tears and smeared mascara. "He took everything from us. He smiled while he ruined my father. I was going to take everything from you, Sterling. Your company, your name, your son. I was going to make you feel what it was like to have nothing." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Every camera, every eye turned to Sterling. His mask didn't just crack, it shattered. The revelation was a cataclysmic blow. He stared at Vivian, this woman he had chosen, and saw not a prize, but a viper he had willingly brought into his bed. He saw the last year of his life, not as a series of choices he had made, but as a script written by the vengeful daughter of a man he barely remembered ruining. His betrayal of Leora wasn't even his own idea. It was a symptom of his own vanity, expertly manipulated. The power he cherished, the control he wielded with such arrogance, was an illusion. He had been a puppet. He looked at Leora, truly looked at her for the first time in a year. He saw the woman he had loved, the quiet strength he had callously misjudged, the life they were supposed to have. He saw the swell of her stomach, containing a child born of a love he had murdered. And he saw her sitting next to Cassian Wolfe, a man who had shown her the respect and kindness he had been incapable of. The judge's voice was a distant buzz. The lawyer's words were meaningless noise. The entire foundation of Sterling's identity, the master of the universe, the man in control, had been pulverized. He had lost everything. Not his money, not his company. But the one thing he now realized was priceless. A genuine human connection. He hadn't just been left. He had been exposed as a fool. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out of the courtroom. His shoulders, for the first time in his life, slumped in defeat. He pushed past the scrum of reporters, his face a ghastly shade of white. He had entered the courtroom as a king demanding his property. He left as a hollow man, haunted by the ruins of a life he had single-handedly and so stupidly destroyed. The reckoning had come, not from a rival or a market crash, but from the ghosts of his own cruelty. The aftermath of the hearing was a quiet implosion. The case was dismissed, Sterling's petitions withdrawn with a terse, one-line email from a junior lawyer at his firm. The story, however, exploded. The tale of the cold millionaire, his vengeful mistress, and the resilient wife became the talk of New York. But for once, the narrative centered not on Sterling's power or Vivian's deceit, but on Leora's quiet dignity. Sterling disappeared from public view. He retreated to his silent penthouse, but the silence was different now. It was no longer a symbol of his control, but a reflection of his emptiness. Vivian was gone, her name and face vanishing as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind only the wreckage of her long-simmering revenge. Sterling was alone with the shambles of his life. He didn't fight the divorce. The papers were signed without contest. He ceded everything Leora and Serena asked for: full legal and physical custody of the baby to Leora, a generous and unconditional child support trust, and the formal transfer of a significant portion of his liquid assets to her. It wasn't a negotiation. It was penance. 3 months later, Leora gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Phoenix, but called him Nix. He had her warm brown eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him in her arms in the quiet hospital room, Leora felt a sense of peace that was so profound it felt sacred. The war was over. Her new life had begun. Cassian was there. He had been there through the final months of her pregnancy, a quiet, constant source of strength and love. He held Nix with a tenderness that made Leora's heart ache with a fierce, protective joy. Their love story hadn't been forged in ballrooms and candlelit dinners, but in the trenches of a bitter legal war and the shared project of rebuilding a life. It was stronger for it. 6 months after Nix's birth, Leora received an unexpected email. It was from Sterling. It was short, stripped of his usual corporate jargon, and shockingly direct. Leora, I know there are no words that can undo the damage I have done. I was a fool, blinded by an arrogance I mistook for strength. I betrayed you, and I betrayed our son before he was even born. I expect nothing from you. Not forgiveness, not a second chance. But I would like to be a father to Nix. Not a provider, not a name on a trust fund, but a father. I have started therapy. I am trying to understand the man I became, and to become a better one. If you would ever be willing to allow it, I would like to see him. The terms would be entirely yours. Sterling. Leora read the email several times. The old Sterling would have sent a demand through his lawyers. This message was different. It was stripped of ego. It was the sound of a man who had finally hit rock bottom and was beginning the slow, painful climb back up. She talked it over with Cassian. His response was, as always, measured and supportive. Nix deserves a father, he said. If Sterling is truly willing to do the work to be a good one, that's a gift to your son. But the choice is yours, Leora. You're in control now. She agreed to a meeting in a public park on a crisp autumn afternoon. Sterling looked different. He had lost weight. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He didn't try to touch Nix at first. He just looked at him, his eyes filled with a universe of regret. That was the beginning of Sterling's redemption. It wasn't a grand cinematic arc. It was a slow, painful, and private process. It was awkward, supervised visits in the park. It was him learning how to hold his son, how to change a diaper, how to exist in a room without trying to command it. He sold the penthouse, moved into a smaller, more human-scale apartment. He stepped down as CEO of Hale Holdings, taking a less public role on the board. He was dismantling the monument he had built to his own ego, stone by stone. He never got Leora back. He never tried. He saw the easy, genuine love between her and Cassian. Saw the stable, happy home they were building for Nix. He understood, with a clarity that was both painful and freeing, that he had forfeited his right to that life. His redemption wasn't about reclaiming what he'd lost, but about honoring it from a distance. It was about becoming a man worthy of being Nix's father. 2 years later, Leora, Cassian, and a laughing, toddling Nix were feeding ducks by the pond in Central Park. It was a perfect Sunday. Leora, now a sought-after art consultant with her own small, successful firm, felt a sense of contentment so deep it was like sunlight warming her from the inside out. Across the pond, partially hidden by a willow tree, Sterling watched them. He wasn't spying. He was just watching. He saw his son, happy and loved. He saw the woman he had thrown away, radiant and thriving. A sharp pang of his colossal loss struck him, as it always did. But this time, it was followed by something else. A quiet sense of gratitude. Gratitude that they were okay. Gratitude that, despite his best efforts to destroy it, this beautiful life existed. He gave a small, sad, accepting smile. He had been a cold millionaire who had lost it all. But in the losing, he had found a sliver of his humanity. It wasn't the ending he would have ever chosen, but it was the one he had earned. He turned and walked away, not a titan of industry, but just a man, finally understanding the true measure of wealth. And so Sterling Hale learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't put a price on a human heart. Leora's journey from the depths of betrayal to a life filled with authentic love and purpose is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest pain. This wasn't just a story about a rich man's downfall. It was about a woman's incredible rise. It shows that true power isn't about control or wealth, but about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to build a new life from the ashes of the old. If this story of heartbreak, resilience, and redemption moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story with real emotional depth. And for more compelling novels and dramatic stories that explore the complexities of the human heart, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching.